Good evening, class. We're so glad to have you joining us tonight. I want to begin tonight by kind of telling you briefly why we're doing what we are doing. There is a move, and it's not a good move. We've just been praying for a genuine move of God. But there's a move that has been taking place now for several years in the church world. And that move is called replacement theology. One of the problems with replacement theology, and it has been entering universities, it's been entering seminaries, it's been entering Bible colleges, and basically what it does is blur the lines between Israel and the church. And of course, replacement theology says, well, that's okay because the church has just replaced all of the promises that God gave Israel have now been transferred to the church, and God no longer has a plan for Israel. That is not true. God's natural people, Israel, and his plan for them, and I say Israel because it is Israel, because Paul the Apostle makes it very clear in Romans 11, which is why we're doing this before we get to Romans 11, so there'll be a complete, total understanding. Paul did not say all Jews shall be saved. He didn't say all Yehuda shall be saved. He said all Israel shall be saved, and there's a reason for that. He deliberately used that term. So the church has its place. God's promises to the nation of Israel are to the nation of the children of Jacob, Israel. We are grafted in. It doesn't matter whether you are Jew or Gentile, whether you end up being from one of the tribes of Israel or not. When Jesus came, he said, whosoever will may come. And we know there were legitimate Gentiles, and there were also those of the household of Israel. And Jesus made a statement while he had his ministry here on earth, and it was what? I have come only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He told his disciples during the time he was sending them out to minister. He said what? Do not go to anywhere except what? To that lost sheep of the house of Israel. But he also said what? Whosoever will may come. Were there legitimate, absolute, total Gentiles who came to Jesus and he didn't cast them out? Remember the Syrophoenician woman? And remember the little conversation. I love this conversation that Jesus had with her, because I believe there was a twinkle going back and forth between the two of them. Because there were people in the crowd who had the view that, well, you can't do anything for her. She's not a Yehudite. And she said, but my daughter. And he said, it's not. And by the way, he did say that with a smile and a twinkle in his eye. He said, well, it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to little dogs. And she didn't even contradict that. By the way, she didn't get offended. Why? Because they're connecting. Because he's letting her know what most of the people in that crowd were thinking. And she said, yes, Lord. She didn't even say, I'm not a dog. How dare you call me a dog? She said, yes, Lord. But I've been watching. And I believe this is what she said, yes, Lord. But the little dogs can get the crumbs. And that's basically saying, that's all I need for my daughter to be healed. She said, they've been playing with everything you've given them. You have given them truth. You have given them what you have come to do, and they're just doing this with their bread. That's bread you've given them. And they're playing with it, and there's enough crumbs they've dumped on the ground to meet my need. And do you know what Jesus said to her? And notice how he verbalizes it. He didn't say Judah. He said, behold, I have not seen such great faith, no, not in all Israel. And we know what happened. Her daughter was healed from that hour. So there are promises, but the promises that God gave to natural Israel are still going to be fulfilled. And there are people who think they're Gentiles, they're going to find out that they're of the household of Israel. And there are genuine Gentiles who have been grafted in, and yes, they've been grafted into the promises. But what we need to realize, because what's happening, and I'm even hearing ministers say it, well, Israel doesn't mean anything. Now listen to what I said here. The present day nation of Israel, and by the way, we need to continue to pray. They are in chaos right now. But, and that's not God's doing, that's the enemy's doing. But the present day nation of Israel is a place setter, which we looked at this when we studied the tribe of Judah, because the rightful ruler of Judah is one day coming to rightfully take his throne, to rule and reign. And by the way, this word says that he'll come to rule with a rod of iron. There's going to be no goofing around when he sits on the throne. But have you ever wanted that for justice? Have you ever seen so much injustice and say, I want justice, real justice. I want real peace. I want real respect. Well, that's going to happen when he's ruling and reigning. But we are also commanded to do what? Inquire about Jerusalem, care about Jerusalem, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and support the nation of Israel. Because it's a place setter. But that's why we're doing what we're doing, to show the plan of God that he is working out. And no matter where these people have gone, and we're just at the tribe of Manasseh right now. There are some other tribes we're still going to look at. They are all over. So we are on page 4. And we were looking last week about the Frisians that descend from Machir's son Peresh. And they were part of the Anglo-Saxons. And obviously, if you have some European background in your DNA, or you have some British background in your DNA, you are descended from Anglo-Saxon. So tonight we're going to look at the Hauki people. So a portion of the Hauki people were descended from Haggai of Gad. However, there were another group who were also called Hauki people, and they were called Fransa Masani, or Sisa Masani. And guess what? Masani is a permutation of the name Manasseh, M-A-N-A-S-S-E-H. Now here's what I want us to remember. Remember that Gad, the tribe of Gad, had settled beside the half-tribe of Manasseh in their land allotment in the Promised Land. Because when they went into the Promised Land, they were very wealthy and they had lots of cattle. And they asked Moses, Reuben, Manasseh, and a half-tribe of Manasseh, and Gad. They said, could we go to the east side of the Jordan River? Could we go there? And Moses had said, what? Yes, you can go to the east side. You have permission. God said it's okay, providing what? You help fight the battle with your brethren so they get their land allotment. And when there is peace, then you can move to the east side of the Jordan with all of your wealth. And they did that. So in the area of Frisia, which is the northern Netherlands, and northwestern Germany, you find descendants of Manasseh had been present. So what are we seeing? We are seeing that even as these tribes migrated after they were captured and exiled by Assyria, and they begin migrating toward the west, guess what? They end up close to one another in the end place of their migrations. So these descendants of Manasseh had been president, and these are the people who invaded Britain. So they settled next to one another, and they're continuing to migrate. Now, the area of East Anglia, and I've kind of put in parentheses there so you can probably recognize some of the names of these places in eastern England. They're the counties of Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire, and Essex. And I'm sure you probably have heard of Cambridge, England, Cambridgeshire, Norfolk, Suffolk. And that they are located in eastern England. And guess what? They received a large number of immigrants from Frisia. And the immigrants from Frisia are from the tribe of Manasseh. And I'll say when they came into England, they didn't stop in England. But they went there. And these people contributed significantly. What people? The peoples who came from Frisia and settled in Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire, and Essex in England. These people contributed significantly to the early populating of America. So now you know the majority of the tribe of Manasseh is found where?
America.
In the United States of America.
Maybe they're causing all this trouble.
What?
Maybe they're causing all this trouble.
No, they're not causing, no, they're not causing the trouble. If anything, they're bringing the blessing. They're bringing the blessing.
I know. We gotta blame somebody.
Well, don't blame one another. Now, Shechem's in note 24, Shechem's descendants became the Sicambri. Now, this is interesting, who were known in East Iran. Iran, yes, that Iran, which was also what, Persia. Because remember, when Assyria came in 722 BC and exiled the 10 northern tribes, they moved them east into the area of Media Persia, which is the location of modern-day Iran. So they became the Sicambri. That's Shechem's descendants. That's another son of Manasseh. So you got Manasseh, and then you have the clans coming from his sons. And they settled in Bactria, and that's why I gave you those maps so you can look and see where Bactria is. And Bactria covered the areas of modern-day Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Now remember what God said, I'm going to scatter you all over the world. But he said to Abraham something. He said, Abraham, your descendants are going to be a blessing to the entire world. Do you understand by what he did? And it was his plan. I mean, do you understand from their going into adultery, he said, that's it, I'm just gonna shut you up in this little nowhere land and I will deal with you there. No, he said, I'm gonna scatter you all over the face of the earth. And when he said to the ends of the earth, it's kind of interesting when we begin to look at some scriptures and we go back to them in Hebrew. It's going to be very interesting. So other parts of the clan of Shechem were the Simbi, and you can see they still kept a little bit of the name of Isaac as it changed, remember, as the name transmutes over and over. And the Simbri were north of the Caspian Sea. Well, if you looked at the Caspian Sea on your map, guess what? This is Media Persia. There's the Caspian Sea. So guess what? They were first exiled there, and isn't it interesting, just accidental, right, that they were found north of the Caspian Sea? No. And they settled on the lower Volga River and Sarmatia. And that's not Sarmatia. Okay, Volga. Oh, Volga River. Volga. Ever hear of the Volga River? Ever take piano or music lessons? And one of the songs was something about the Volga River. That's all I remember. It's like, and it was just da 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 da. And it was something about the Volga River. Now, remember, as we go to note 25, any questions up to now about? Okay. Remember, anytime you see anything with an AS, it is speaking all the way back to Joseph. It was a prefix that would refer back to Joseph. And we know that Joseph, and we have to look at this with having to do with Ephraim and Manasseh. Why? Why is that important? When you begin to see prefixes that go back to Joseph. Because Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joseph that Jacob Israel adopted as his own, therefore giving them full tribal rights. Joseph was Jacob Israel's favorite son. So when he meets his first two sons, he said, "They're mine." In other words, rather than you, Joseph, having one tribal identity. In other words, okay, you come in with your other 11 brothers. He said, no, these two are mine. They are adopted by me as my sons, and they will each have a tribal identity. And of course, the tribe of Levi then later becomes the priestly tribe, and they do not have a land allotment. So in essence, do you see what's happening with Joseph being the favored son? His sons, they have two tribal identities. All the other brothers have one. And all the promises that the Lord showed Joseph and all of the things that Jacob said about Joseph has come true. Because he said, guess, and he says something else about Joseph. He said, your descendants are going to go over the wall. They're going to go over the wall, and they're going to prosper, and they're going to be very fruitful. All I'm going to say is, have they become fruitful? Yes, they have. So I'm saying this because it says the descendants of Azriel, form of Joseph, settled in Surrey. Some of you may have heard of Surrey, England, because that's the southern portion of Saxon Mercia in England. So we're seeing descendants of the tribe of Manasseh in England. Now the Sumboi Agaloi, and again, I'm not expecting you to remember all these names other than if you might be reading on your own and you come across these terms and say, oh, now I know who's, yes. They were a branch of the Angles. And the Sumboi Langobardi, or Lombardy, that might ring a bell with some of you, right?
Yeah.
Many of you? Now, very interesting, because remember we talked about some divisions that happened. Yes, some people did stay in the area of modern-day Italy. But guess what? Some of them splintered off and went other places. It's kind of interesting because the Sumboi Langobardi all are associated, now listen to this, with Shemitah from Machir. Now I want to do this because, so that you'll understand where we're at on this. Machir is a son of Manasseh. So, okay, so you've got Manasseh, and then you have Machir, and then you have Shemitah. So if you go to 1 Chronicles, say, I'm telling you the truth. I'm getting this from the book. the book. Okay. So, 19. And the sons of Shemitah were Shemitah of. Let me just. We'll go all the way down so you'll know where I'm coming from. The descendants of Manasseh, his Syrian concubine bore him Machir. I want to stop here for a minute. I want you to see something. They're still in the line. They're still Israel. How many are seeing what I'm saying? Some of you are just looking at me like deer in the headlights. First of all, Ephraim and Manasseh. Let me ask you this. Are Ephraim and Manasseh children of Israel?
Yes.
Yes. And Ephraim and Manasseh are what? Half Egyptian. They are Joseph's sons by his Egyptian wife, Pharaoh's daughter. Did that seem to bother God?
No.
No. King David has two very interesting, and notice, obviously, all of the other males in the lineage of David were Yehudites. They were from, okay, right? Israel or Yehudite. And you don't hear those women's names, right? In the lineage that you read. If you read the lineage of Jesus in Matthew and Luke, Matthew gives the lineage from Joseph, who was supposedly, remember it even says that in the Bible, goes to Joseph, supposedly the father of Jesus. Luke is Mary's lineage. And there's, strangely enough, that there are two women that are mentioned. One of them is Ruth. One of them is Ruth, who was a Moabitess. Well, okay, she was a Moabitess, but she did marry, she didn't marry, but it didn't bother God that Ruth was in the lineage of Jesus. And there was another woman, Rahab. Now they kind of gave her another title, which is kind of interesting, because they Rahab the harlot.
Yeah.
But understand something, you will read that story. Guess how Rahab got acquainted with the spies? I could tell you to go read it. They went to her because her lodging was on the wall of the city.
Yeah.
Now, they probably went for this reason. She'd probably know everything that was going on with the fighting men of Jericho. She would have. And they went and got information. Now, it talks about Rahab. Do you know that Rahab is also listed in the heroes of faith? By faith, Rahab. I really believe that information is in the Bible for a reason for all of us. Because sometimes I've met people, and they say, I don't think I belong in the kingdom. I said, oh, yes, you do belong in the kingdom of God. Yes, you do. And you're no less or no more than anyone else in the kingdom. Because it was her faith. Why? They said, listen, we give you a promise. When we take this city, you put all your family members, you put them in your house, and you put this scarlet cord. Oh, the scarlet cord's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? It was a scarlet cord, and it was a scarlet cord that went all the way to Ireland.
Yeah.
Said, you put this scarlet cord, and if you'll do that, you and everybody that you bring into your house. I think she went out there, and she was probably one of the first real evangelists. She was telling her family, you need to get into here. You need to get here. And they were saved. And then she becomes an ancestor of King David and an ancestor of Jesus. God has a marvelous plan. So, I'm going to read this. The descendants of Manasseh, his Syrian concubine, bore him Machir, the father of Gilead, the father of Asriel. Now there you see the Asriel coming in. Machir took as his wife the sister of Hupim and Shupim. And we think we have strange names. Whose name was Maacah. The name of Gilead's grandson was Zelophehad, but Zelophehad begot only daughters. So now what's going to happen? Well, Maacah, the wife of Machir, bore a son, and she called his name Peresh. The name of his brother was Sheresh, and his sons were Ulam and Rakem. The son of Ulam was Bedin. These were the descendants of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. His sister, Hamaleketh, bore Ishhad, Abiezer, and Malam. And the sons of Hira's Shemida were Ahian, Shechem, Likhi, and Anaiah. Yeah, So you say, where is this going? Well, I want to look at with Shemida. They're associated with Shemida, who was obviously from Machir, son of Manasseh. Now, Samedes, in Celtic tradition, was the ancestor of the southern Gauli in France. Now, remember that in Hebrew, and I know it was a long time ago since some of you took Hebrew. Actually, you realize it's been 7 years since I taught Hebrew.
Wow.
And we know that S and SH, Sin and Shin, are the same Hebrew letter. What's the only difference?
The dot.
Okay, the dot. And so for sin, where's the dot? On the left, because sin is never right. So the dot for the letter Shin is on the right. Now, how many now remember I told you how you can tell the difference between when you're reading Sin and Shin? Okay, Joy did. Thank you, because you knew the dot. So it could be also Shemides. Do you understand? Because we're coming from Shemida. So S and H are the same Hebrew letter with dot on left or right. Thus the name Shemida, the son of Gilead, could be also pronounced what? Samida. And so the Samedes in Celtic, British Irish tradition came from Shemida. Now Gilead's son was Jezer. And Jezer was a forefather of at least a portion. Now, we've already studied these people when we studied the tribe of Judah, right? The people known as Khazars. K-H-A-Z-A-R-S. K-H-A-Z-A-R-S. Now, remember when we studied the tribes of Simeon, way back, I know, weeks ago. Okay, so you had Simeon and Manasseh, but the Khazars are believed to be descended from both the tribes of Simeon and Manasseh. Why? What happened? They intermarried. Some remained coming from Manasseh, some remained coming from Simeon, but some intermarried. And as they intermarried and went down, guess what? They were same people group coming from a merging of the two tribes. And we know all about the Khazars. But understand, what do we say? They're all Israel. They're all part of Israelites. They're Israelite. They are not Jews. Some of them are, and here's why. Some of them are Jews by virtue of the fact that at different times in their exile, some of them converted to Judaism. In other words, remember we said when they were exiled, they lost their language, they lost their identity, they lost their faith. And God said that in his word when they'd be exiled, that they would lose that. But many of them, at some point in their history, did indeed convert. And some of the Khazars did. But they're all Israel, and isn't it interesting that many of them, in wherever they were exiled and wherever they migrated, were the very first to receive the gospel. Why is that? I believe it's in their spiritual DNA. If you've ever wondered sometimes, why me? Why when I heard the gospel did I grab hold of it? Well, perhaps it's in your DNA. Now, Gilead had also a son. His name was, and I'm going to call him Heifer just because I don't want to call him. So Gilead's son Heifer, in note 29, was ancestor, and we think we have strange names, people group names. Hypheringus. They were a people group. Who do you come from? Well, I come from the Hypheringus. Well, wait till we get to the Thingies. Oh, we had that last week. Remember we had the Thingies? Oh, how many remember last week we dealt with a people group called the Thingies? That was their name. And you thought that was something that somebody made up in your elementary school classroom. You're a Thingy. So Heifer was ancestor of the Hypheringus, who were a Saxon group found in what is modern-day Havering, located east of London. London. So Gilead's son, Heifer, his descendants, located in London. And then Heifer had a son, Zelophehad. Zelophehad. Aren't you glad for just the names we have that are just like one or two syllables? And this man, his son, Zelophehad, remember we read, he was famous for his daughters. And a very interesting situation. So I want us to go to the book of Numbers. Now, Zelophehad, the son of Heifer, had no sons, but daughters. And the names of the daughters of Zelophehad were Mala, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And I would just mention, just in passing, that names such as Noah, Milcah, and Tirzah are very popular Jewish names for girls today. In fact, the last director of the Canton Jewish Community Center had a daughter called Milcah. I remember when she was born and had her naming ceremony. Noah was the name of the granddaughter of one of the prime ministers of Israel. So very, very popular name, as is Tirzah even today. And very interesting, we know that, remember when someone was born with only daughters and no sons, remember, and they said, wait a minute, Moses, should we just lose our whole family inheritance because there is no male heir? And what did Moses say? No, the daughters could inherit. I say that because our faith gets really attacked often for not being oh, you just don't care about inclusion and equality. Equality for women, first of all, understand Jesus made it very clear in his own ministry. He said he had women who traveled with him and who supported him. And the Apostle Paul, who gets one of the worst raps for being anti-women, he wasn't anti-women, he was anti-disorder. He wasn't anti-women. If you read the book of Acts, you're going to find something that happens. When we first encounter Aquila and Priscilla, it's Aquila and Priscilla as a ministry team, a husband-wife ministry team. And by the way, both Aquila and Priscilla ministered to the Apostle Paul. But later on in the book, something flips. What flips? Priscilla's name comes first. And the reason why is because her ministry became much more public and prominent. Aquila had no problem with that. He had no problem with that. Because we are equal before God, but sometimes one will be more prominent than another. No problem. The beginning, Aquila was more prominent in the ministry. Later, it was Priscilla. And you know, when the Lord is using an individual, he's not looking at your gender. He's looking at your heart for him and the gifting for any particular time. It wasn't that Priscilla was better than Aquila or Aquila was better than Priscilla. At that point in their ministry, it was her ministry that was more needed and more focused. So when anybody tells you, you religious people, you just don't treat women right, say, I want to take you to a scripture in the in the Old Testament where Moses said, no, you can inherit just like male heirs of another father will inherit. Just saying. Okay. So he was one of the children of Israel who came out of Egypt, Hepher, under the leadership of Moses, and entered the land of Canaan. And now I jumped ahead, so now we're going to go back and I'm going to give you the scripture for what I just told you. So Zelophehad died without any male heir, and his daughters received their own land allotments within the land of Israel. Because remember, their father leaves in the Exodus. So we're talking, and by the way, we're talking about early on when God established this through Moses. So they get to the promised land, and remember, Joshua has to hand out the land allotments. Aren't you glad Moses settled this? Yeah. So I'm sure Joshua was very happy that Moses settled this, and he didn't have to deal with it. It's already, guess what? It's already established precedent. So the daughters of Zelophehad, guess what? They gave their names to clans belonging to Manasseh. Why? Because they didn't have any brothers. And male heirs did what? Male heirs would give their names to the clans that fell under their fathers. And to areas within the tribal allotment of Manasseh. And you can see this in Joshua, so you'll know I'm not telling you an untruth. Aren't you glad for the Bible? So let's look at Joshua 17:3. But Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons but only daughters, and these are the names. So I read you those names. Now the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Now, if you will look at Numbers 27 and Joshua 17, you will see that basically what happened is they were given land allotments. So if you will look down, And they came near before Eleazar the priest, before Joshua the son of Nun, before the rulers, saying, verse 4, the Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. So what are they saying? Hey, this precedent doesn't just even go back to Moses. It was the Lord who commanded Moses to do this. So ladies, God's for you.
Really.
So don't let the world come in and muddy up what you know to be true. And by the way, I don't need the world to give me equality. I've already got it from the Lord.
Yep.
That's why I don't battle this thing about women shouldn't be in the ministry. You know, I have an answer. And I've dealt with it. By the way, I've dealt with it all my life. My mother dealt with it. Amy Supplement McPherson dealt with it. And all I'm going to say, I didn't see any man buy that property in Echo Park. Nobody wanted it. She said, I'll buy it. And someone said, what are you going to do with that property? She said, I'm going to get someone to dig the foundation. And they said, well, what are you going to do with that hole? She said, I've built the hole, God will fill it. I can tell you, I have stood at Angela's Temple. It's still standing, and the ministry and the gospel is still going out from Echo Park. So why? Because God established it. So when people come to me and say, well, and I always know how it's going to start. They said, well, you know, I kind of like your teaching, but you know, and they start to go, I said, would you like that passage in Corinthians? I said, I know exactly where you're going. And then I began to put the context of that. They said, well, I just don't think God could call a woman. And I said, well, here's the thing. Believe me, I did not jump into this. I did everything I could to run the other direction. I took the long way around. I really did. I graduated from Bowling Green and taught school before I ever answered the call to go to Bible college. Because I wanted to do I was a pastor's kid, so I wanted to do everything but that, because I knew what it entailed. I knew what my parents went through. And that's why I've always said, need may get you there, but only call will keep you there. But I knew that I could not run from the call forever. So when people say that to me, I say, well, you know what? I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Go talk to God about it, because he's the one that called me. I did not call myself, never would have called myself, wasn't what I would choose for myself, but he called me. And I'm going to tell you right now, I would not be content doing anything else, because anything else would be out of the will of God. So, you just say that. And I'm not in the ministry to make a point or make a statement. I'm in the ministry because he called me, and I know I don't have any other choice. Okay. So they said, therefore, according to the command of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brothers. 10 shares fell to Manasseh besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side of the Jordan. Remember? Because they were allowed, Manasseh was allowed the other side of the Jordan. Because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance among the sons, and the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. So they got their land allotment. Now Noah, so after the daughters, and you can read Numbers 27 and Joshua 17, tells more about this. Noah also gave her name to the city of Naarus near the Don River in modern-day Russia. So which means that what? The descendants of Manasseh ended up in an area of Russia. And in the area of Naarus, there was a Scythian group named Nuri. And that's interesting. We say, okay, Noah gave her name, and you have the Naarus, and you have the Nuri. But here's what's very interesting, too. The history of Sweden states that the Nuri, and I like the way the Swedes put it, they were remnants of the 10 families of Israel. They call them 10 families of Israel. The Israelite Nuri then migrated to Scandinavia. So you see now you have part of the tribe of Manasseh that ends up with another tribe, the tribe of what? In Scandinavia. Dan. Okay. Now, Hogla, how would you like to name your daughter Hogla?
How would she like?
I don't know of any family that would name their daughter Hogla today. I have a feeling it was probably pronounced Hogla. I don't think it was pronounced Hogla. But she has a name from which appeared among early Frankish leaders. Okay, so now you're talking about leadership. Again, I go back to the promises of God to Israel, his people, chosen people, his natural chosen. He said, what? You're going to always be what? The head and not the tail. Wherever they are, they rise. They rise to leadership. They rise to the top. It happens. It's not happening because they push themselves. And all the people, they say, well, you know, these people are taking over the world. They're always doing this and that. It was just what God declared. And they're just living out the declaration of God. And so her descendants appeared among Frankish leaders such as the Hachalark. And of course, they changed the Hug part, but you can see that the name is still there, because what happens to names? They change. I'm going to share because my family is here tonight, and I love them. and you know Cheryl, this is her son, Jimmy. He will always be Jimmy to me. And I love him. I love him dearly. And they will relate to this. Our grandfather and his brother Joe had a problem with the Catholic Church. And so they changed the spelling of their name from the Catholic spelling, Irish spelling of Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, to K-E-L-L-E-Y. And I don't want to go into that. There was no dealing with that. It was just the way it was. And I'm not even going to tell you the story because I'm not. Some of you already know the story. I told it. And he just had it with the priest, and that was it. But anyhow, they changed their spelling. Now, here's what's interesting. In the cemetery in Cambridge, there are brothers and family members. It goes 2 rows, about 2 rows down. And I'll never forget, because it used to upset my mother so much. And some of you know my mom. And she this is just terrible. She said, I don't know why Daddy, and he was Daddy to those girls forever. I mean, they always called him Daddy. They said, I don't know why Daddy and Uncle Joe did that. They said, because people come into the cemetery now, they'll never know their relatives here because the names isn't even spelled. And the brothers are right next, Johnny, K-E-L-L-Y. My grandfather, Donald, K-E-L-L-E-Y. She said, they'll never know their relatives. I'm thinking, well, we know. We know. So I've said that now do you understand how names can change? Sometimes they'll reverse. That's why we were saying there are names here that are from Isaac. Why? Because God declared to Abraham, he said, from your son Isaac, your descendants will be named. That's where we get the Yitzhak, but you get the Saxons. Saxon comes from Isaac. It's just through the times of having the names change because they moved through people groups who spoke different languages. And so the name then changed in that language groups, but there still carries that little, you can pick it up. Because again, God declared that. That clock doesn't tell me a thing because it's an hour late. Okay, so according to my watch, I need to stop. But let me finish this one. Oh, I did do it. So next week we'll pick up at Milka. Yeah. So what you can see, their names changed, but guess what? Now you had some of the tribe of Manasseh in France. The key point is they went into these areas. I will say this, they didn't stay there. So they're going to keep migrating. And I'm kind of giving you the end, but there are so many things. You may want to bring with you next week a dollar bill. No, I'm not going to take another offering, but I want you to, we may get that far next week. Manasseh, because I've already told you this, so it's not going to be a secret. Most of the descendants, not everyone living in America is a descendant of Manasseh. We already know that, because we know there are some Yehudahites. But the majority of the descendants of the tribe of Manasseh live in the United States of America. And I will tell you, we may get far enough to look at some of the things that remind us of Joseph.
You think there's still some in Russia too?
Yes, and there are some in Scandinavia, there are some.
They're all over the world.
The
Yeah.
parts, tiny groups up. But the majority have already migrated to the United States. And this is true for many people groups, but with other people groups, the majority of the tribe has not migrated here, okay? For example, I will tell you, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you tonight, Ephraim is what nation? Britain, the United Kingdom. And so most of Ephraim are in nations belonging to Britain or the United Kingdom. Most of them have not left of Ephraim. A few of Ephraim have. There are a few of Ephraim here, obviously. But the majority is there. And this is where I'm going to end with this tonight. This is why, please hear me when I'm saying this. British Israelism is a heresy. It was promulgated primarily in our day by someone by the name of Herbert Armstrong. And sometimes it goes by the term Armstrongism. Because here's where his error is, among other things. But this is where his error is. All of Israel is Britain. In other words, all the tribes are in Britain. Okay? That's not true. And they have, therefore, and that has given rise to, by the way, replacement theology. So now the tribes are all Christian and they've replaced all the promises given to Israel. No, that is not true. But here's the problem. Then we've got the people who have gone headlong into replacement theology, meaning it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter where Israel is today. Yes, it does. So we can look at God working his plan, and he's going to bring it to fulfillment, because I read the book, and the book says that in the end time, when Messiah comes, he's going to give land allotments to the tribes. How many know you're going to have to, they're going to have to know their tribes to know where, and he said, this is where you go, this is where you go, and this is where you go. They may not know what tribe they are today, and by the way, even by the way, Judaism teaches that they won't know their identity until Messiah comes. So we agree on that. I agree. We won't know till Messiah comes, and then the land allotments. And guess what? There will be a land allotment for the Yehudahites, but there will also be land allotments for all of Israel. Because the Messiah will take the two sticks of Judah and Israel, and they will become one. That's what Paul meant when he said, all Israel shall be saved. They're not lost. Aren't you glad they're not lost? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the truth of your word. Lord, I pray that this would not just be some kind of a tracing of people groups or history, but Lord, this is your plan unfolding. You want us to see that if you can do this with your natural people Israel, and you know where every one of them is today, then Lord, our lives and the plan for our lives that you are working out will be completed. And we give you the praise and the honor and the glory that is due you. In Jesus' name, amen. Please let me know you are watching tonight. You can call the number that is on the website, or if you want to give in response to the teaching you received, you can mail it in, you can drop it in the drop box. But we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, please let me know your questions. I will answer them in the next class session if you will get them to me. Also, if you have a prayer request, we would love to pray for you prior to our class. Know that Jesus loves you, we love you, and the one thing we know is God has a plan, and he's working it and bringing it to fruition. Good night.